An old saying that goes that possession is 9/10 of the law. Well, I'm here to tell you that possession of wealth is 9/10 of politics, and that's what I'm going to talk about in terms of the GST and the proposals from the LNP or the trial balloons that they're setting up to try to get you to accept an increase in the GST from its current 10% to about 12.5% or even higher, and widen it to include items like fresh food, private education and private wealth, private education and private medical care. Ha, that's it. Okay. Now, I doubt if the private education or private medical care part will go through, but widening it to include fresh food is definitely going to be on the agenda. Definitely going to be on the conservatives' agenda in this coming year. And you'll hear a lot of people saying that are coming from very legitimized positions of authority that it's the only reasonable thing we can do in order to solve the budget crisis, which is causing the government to come down heavy with cuts to this, that, and the other kind of public service because they don't have enough money in the budget, and because the mining boom is over with, and so forth and so on. All of these rationalizations are going to be used. Well, let me tell you that this is all part of the political game of possession of wealth. Now, where does wealth come from? Let's just think about it for a moment. Wealth comes from you. You produce it. You produce it for wages. In fact, the people who are in the economy, who are working for wages, the 90%, are the ones that are producing the wealth of Australia and every other nation for that matter. And what happens is that you produce the wealth, but you end up in the long term retaining about 20% of it, and the upper 10% generally retain about 80% of it. Now, of course, their share goes up as they go up in the 10% from like say the 9%, the 8%, the 7%, all the way up to the 2,800 people who are in the 1%. Now, they really own a lot of wealth. And of course, they don't need it for their everyday living standards. They use it basically as a form of political power and manipulating the society to exist the way they want it to exist. And so, what we get back in wages and working conditions is supplemented through the tax system, and that's the main focus I want to shine a light on in terms of the political game of possession of wealth is the tax system. Now, conservatives love the idea that we live in a society of an equality of classes. So each class is equal. I mean, among the two big classes anyway. And they all should be taxed at the same percentage. So that's basically what regressive taxation does. And the GST is a regressive tax. It taxes everybody at the point of sale 10%. And if they get their way, it'll tax them even more. And that means that Twiggy Forrest, who makes $50 million a day, will be taxed as much as Joe Smith, who drives the garbage truck every year for $70,000. The regressive taxation system is also reflected in the petrol excise and the sin taxes, like the ones on cigarettes and beer. And it's also reflected in some of the new proposals that are being thought of by the LNP, that we need to pay a GP tax. That's a regressive tax. Everybody pays the same, whether they're making $50 million a day or $15 an hour. So that's their preferred method of taxation, and they're going to try to convince you all that that's what we need to do in order to save, because the budget is in deficit. And truly, the budget is in deficit. And the reason it's in deficit is because not because we're not producing more wealth every year, because we are. We're producing way more wealth every year. We produce in terms of the GDP, which is a measure of all the goods and services that are sold in the country, the gross domestic product. We're producing in real terms an average of 2 to 3% more wealth every year, and so our productivity is going up. We're producing more wealth, and yet since the 70s. Since Gough Whitlam's time, when workers got 75% of the GDP, today they're getting 60%. And it's all part of the political game of possession, where we're getting less, but we're producing more. And we're getting less of what we produce. And the way the tax system works in that is that, for instance, in 2005, Howard came up with a tax, an income tax cut, which benefited, obviously, as usual, the upper 10% more than the lower 80%. But that 2005 income tax cut cost the budget, cost the Treasury $169 billion from 2005 to 2012. And it lost the Treasury $40 billion alone in 2013. And the deficit in 2013 was $38 billion. So you can see that if they had rescinded the 2005 income tax cut that Howard was using in order to try to get elected in 2007, we wouldn't have a budget deficit, even though the mining boom has slowed down. Howard instituted it during a peak of the mining boom, so most people didn't even notice it, and it wasn't noticed in the budget. But now it's being noticed, and now we're paying for it in a way by saying the LNP saying we can't afford anything anymore. Even though we're producing more wealth, we can't afford Medicare without a GP tax. The public school systems are being attacked. There's too much. It's costing too much. Everything is costing too much, even though we're producing more. Well, I say bullshit to that. We've got a lot of ways we can get that wealth, that increased wealth, into the budget so that we can pay for all the services that we actually need. And those public services can be funded if we, for instance, rescind that 2005 income tax cut, which benefited the upper 10% the most, and we could also do it by increasing taxes at the big end of town. The big end of town, meaning the company tax, for instance. The company tax was 49% in 1986. And that's when we had free medical care, and we had public education. No one was talking about cutting back on public education. And then in 1988, Hawke cut the company tax down to 39%, and then Howard, when he got in, cut it down to 30%, and now the LNP under Abbott's going to cut it down to 28.5%. Now that's a lot of wealth that's not going into the Treasury, which could easily balance the budget, but they're not going to talk about that in their mature discussion about taxes. They're not going to talk about the $4.5 billion annually that goes in tax concessions to the mining capitalists. No, they're going to talk about raising the GST, and it's going to be the only thing that we could possibly do. Well, yeah, that's bullshit. We have to call their bullshit. They're trying to send a price signal to us about going to the doctor too often by putting a GP tax on us. We have to send a price signal to them, and the price signal to them is, you are going to be voted out of office. Now, there's a lot of organizations here today who are all dedicated in one shape, way, or form to getting rid of the LNP as the government. Now, I suggest that you just get in and try to get with some of these people, associate with them, and try to and use your organized force to boot the LNP out. And that should be our general slogan for the day. Maybe let's boot the LNP out. Thank you very much.